Hi, today's topic will be about pitching for funding. I'll be looking at the what, when, how, or what of pitching. For the benefit of those who do not know me, I am Sir Manu Machaba. I am a business mentor and a coach. Among some of what I do as a coach is business model and strategy development. I train entrepreneurs on sales and how to pitch for funding, skills to negotiate commercial contracts and business conflicts, and many other business-related topics. I work mostly with startups from various incubation hubs around Gauteng, as well as startups from Small Enterprise Development Agency. Perhaps for many years you've been harboring the idea of being an entrepreneur, or perhaps you've just recently identified a business opportunity. Why is it impossible for you to implement it? I believe we all agree that funds are the biggest obstacle that stand between us and the realization of our business success or our long-held dreams of running a successful business. Whether you are a startup or a seasoned entrepreneur, you will always have a need to be funded. The success of your funding application will depend on few factors such as your business plan. The last mile will always be that opportunity that you get when you meet and pitch your business concept to potential investors or funders. Now, when you talk about funders, you must bear in mind that there are different forms of funding. You have one from the government. It can be from a corporation, or it can be from a foundation. Some of them could be so-called angel investors, or it can be crowdfunding, and many other sources of funding. It can even be family funding or friends funding. Let me go back and talk a little bit about your preparation for a pitch. Now, a business plan is what a CV is to a job seeker, and your pitch is what the interview is to the interviewee. If we all agree that we prepare ourselves for a job interview by doing research about our prospective employer, in funding, we also do the same thing to know more about our funders and what interests them or where their hearts lie. As opposed to seasoned entrepreneurs, most startups are inexperienced or terrified by the funding pitch itself, and very often they panic and never fully present their business concepts to their potential funders. And most of these business concepts, I must say, they are brilliant. It's only that when it comes to pitching or presenting it, that's where they fail dismally. Can you guess what the reason is that they perform so poorly? The answer is poor performance as well as lack of proper preparation. And these emanate from lack of confidence. Instead of getting presentation across, they get butterflies. Raising capital from investors is difficult and can be time consuming. The investor hopes to see a good business model and a convincing strategy of how you are going to execute your model or your business. Therefore, it is crucial that a startup absolutely nails its pitch deck and articulates a compelling and interesting story. Currently, with the COVID-19, we see most businesses that have a good track record, especially financially, including medium and large enterprises applying for funding because of the shrunk economy. On the other hand, We also see growth in startups that innovate brilliant solutions. However, startup funds remain their biggest insurmountable hurdle. Are you one of these people, or have you experienced this failure as well? Well, if that is the case, this presentation is for you and any other person that needs funding. We are going to dismantle the funding pitch strategies and techniques that investors would like to hear from anyone that is seeking funding. Pitching is intended to showcase a couple of aspects of your business plan. This brief presentation is meant to give you an idea of what to expect or what the funders or investors want to hear from you. Well, unfortunately, due to time factors, we cannot exhaust the full masterclass in these few minutes that I'm going to present. Usually, these trainings or this masterclass trainings last me anytime between 3 to 5 hours, because we actually get into the details of what needs to be in your pitch deck. We analyze, we categorize, we dissect the nature of your business, and look at how it can best be presented to the potential funders. I'm therefore going to share with you a few pitching tips that you must keep in mind before the actual presentation. And bear in mind, this is not an exclusive or conclusive list of tips. This is just a superficial or a few of them. 1. Keep your pitch concise, memorable, influential, and ensure that you narrate it in a form of a story. Remember, stories are easy to remember. Demonstrate the service or the product inside. Be an expert. Don't just show that you have information about the product, but remember, the investors or funders want to see that you've got more than the common knowledge that any person in the street has. Thirdly, demonstrate the ease of how the product works or the service can be implemented. There are certain phrases that you must avoid using because they are actually very detrimental to your pitch. These phrases are phrases such as, we have no competition. Obviously, there is no business, no matter how new, that can never have any competition. Secondly, avoid saying all we need is 1% of the market, because you are unlikely to get that 1%. Or we will get huge viral usage. You can't say that when you are still a startup and you don't have any projections or rather traction that has actually taken place, especially a huge traction. And finally, avoid saying this product will market itself. There is no product that markets itself. It needs to be marketed and effectively marketed. Now, let us look briefly at what must go into your sliding pitch or your pitch slides. Now, remember, let me say this again. This is by no means a full master class. We are just highlighting, on a very high, in a very high level, what needs to go into your pitch deck. You will have to put in your company overview. Now, that's usually on your first slide. This is where you are going to inform your investors or potential funders about what your mission is, or rather your company mission, the vision, and the values of your company. In a nutshell, you are also going to inform the funders about what is it that your business is all about. The team slide, this is where you are going to speak more about who is in your team. Many investors consider the team behind a startup to be more important than the idea or the product itself. The investors will want to know whether the team has the right set of skills, drive, experience, and the temperament to grow the business. You must anticipate questions such as the following from the potential investors. Who are the founders and key team members? What relevant domain or experience does the team have? That is, they want to know if whatever business you are embarking on, have you done it before? Or has any one of your team members been involved in a similar project or in a similar business? What key additions to the team are needed in the short term? And also, they might want to know where relevant, especially where it involves technical skills, whether any of your team members has the requisite technical skills or academic qualifications. Now let's look at the problem. The problem side really relates to what problems are there. You need to sort forth the problem that your startup is trying to solve and convince, or rather not even really convince, but influence the investors that it is such a big problem that can lead to substantial revenues if you are able to solve it with your product or your service. You must be able to answer, what is the problem? Why is it so important to solve this particular problem? How often do users experience this problem? Why are existing solutions inadequate to solve this problem? Assuming that there are some solutions, then you must be able to say, why is it so impossible for them to solve these problems? I can give an example here that, say for an example, users or network users are actually on ADSL and you want to introduce your fiber. So you should be able to say, what is the problem with ADSL and what the fiber will be able to do that the DSL cannot do. For many companies, their intellectual property will be a key to success. Investors will pay particular attention to your answers to these questions around IP. Well, basically they want to know, what key intellectual property does the company have? That is around the existing patents or any patents pending, copyrights, trade secrets, trademarks, or domain names. Let us look at what should be incorporated in the solution slide. Your proposed solution to the problem must show why it's better than existing solutions in the market, as I alluded before. How is your solution better with respect to features, functionality, ease of use, costs, or otherwise? Now here, remember when we speak about the features, we're speaking about your specs. When you speak about your functionality, how are they going to be able to use your product? And also, is it going to be user friendly when people use it? And also, what are the cost implications? Remember, some of the solutions, they don't actually worth the price that you pay. So you must be able to say, in relation to the solution, the running cost will be less and you'll have high profit margins. Now let's look at, for example, your solution must also have what you call a value proposition. Now, value proposition will always go hand in glove with your competitive advantage. I'm not going to delve much into the above value proposition and competitive advantage because I've spoken extensively about each of them in my other two previous videos that I've posted on YouTube. And also, you must be able to show, or speak around the issue of pricing, because they would want to know, or investors would want to know, do you have a pricing model? If you do, then you must be able to say, what is your pricing model technique? Let's look at the product. The product itself. Now you must be able to tell us, what is it that the customers or clients or end users love about your product? Is it because it's user-friendly? Is it because of the specs? Is it because it takes away their pain? Is it because it increases their profit margins? Is it because it cuts on their production time? Or what other factors are there that customers would like about your product? How does it empower your clients or users to do something they couldn't do before, or make their experience many times better than before? And finally, how does your product alleviate their problems? Now, when you address this, you should be able to clearly articulate what are the features of the company's product or service. What is it that is so unique or different about your product? What benefits and advantages does it have for the end users? So we want to know, what are the gains that I'll be able to acquire when I use your product, and also what pains is your product taking away? Now, when you look at competition, funders want to know. Remember, I said you cannot say to the funders that I do not have competition. Rather, you can mention that you do have competition, and how are you going to deal with competition? They will want to know, who are your company's competitors or your product competitors? Why do you consider them to be your competition? What is so similar that you would think that these are your competition? And remember, competition can be categorized into two. There is a direct competition and there is an indirect competition. And you must also be able to say, how big or small are they? Now, maybe perhaps before I move on to the next one, let me give you an example between a direct and indirect competition. Your direct competition will be, for example, airlines. British Airways, direct competition is SAA, for an example, or Emirates. Now, when you talk about who is the competition for the airlines, or indirect competition, the indirect competition then would be, your buses, your cabs, people that provide e-hailing services. So those would be the indirect competitions. So you must be able to know who your direct competition and or your indirect competition is or will be. They also wanted to know, what is your strategy to increase your turnover? How are you going to ensure that your turnover increases, whether annually or monthly? What is your growth plan? Now, which methods or techniques are you going to employ in order to ensure that your business grows? When we look at traction, one of the most important things for investors will be the signs of any early traction or customers that use your product. Therefore, demonstrating that you have gotten early adoption or paying customers puts you far ahead of entrepreneurs who just have an idea or a mere business plan. Investors usually avoid investing in an idea which is not tested. They want to see that there is already some existing traction in a form of customers or clients or end users. You must then be able to show that you have more than just an idea and that you have gotten early traction on developing the product, getting customers, or signing up partners. And this can also be in a form of letters of interest or intent from the people that are going to be using your customer or your clients. The traction slide can also include information about early customers or pilot programs, revenues or other financial metrics, whether you've got strategic partnerships and so on. And it can also mean that who else is interested in using your product, who was using the competition but now wants to move over to your product. Now let's look at the market slide. Now that you have identified the gap in the market, you must also be able to identify the market in that gap. Angel investors typically want to invest in businesses that have a large market opportunity and a potential to grow exponentially. You will need to paint a clear picture that the market opportunity is meaningfully large and it's actually even growing. You must be ready to answer questions, such as, for example, what is the actual addressable market? How big is that addressable market opportunity? What data do you have to back up your claims about the total addressable market and growth rate? And remember, you have to be honest in terms of answering all these questions that the funders want to know, because any dishonesty might disqualify you and actually even disadvantage you in future applications for funding. The customer acquisition slide speaks to costs and long-term value of the customer acquisition. How much is going to cost you to acquire these customers? It can be in a form of social media, it can be in a form of signages, it can be in many other forms, but it can be in a form of promotions. How much is it going to cost you? So you should be able to answer that type of question. You might also want to consider the possible questions such as, how are you going to get your first customer? What marketing costs will you incur to acquire a customer? What will be the likely lifetime value of each customer? And finally, what channels will you use to acquire the user or the customer? Remember, once more, this is not an exhaustive list. It's just some of the questions that you might be asked. Obviously, there's a whole lot of questions that you might want to consider, and be ready or prepared in case they ask you those questions. On the financial side, angel investors will want to understand the financials of the business and any financial projections that you have. For example, they might want to know, do you have a detailed financial projections for the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, or so on? What are the key underlying assumptions for the projections that you've just made? They want to know, these projections, are they really reasonable and realistic? Obviously, if there's an inch of doubt, nobody will want to invest in such projections that are unreliable. And finally, what are the key cost components for the product or the service? The investors want to understand what risk there might be to the business. What is your thinking process and the mitigating precautions that you are taking to reduce those risks in case they materialize? What do you see as the financial principal risk to the business? For innovators or investors, what legal, product liability, or regulatory or technology risks do you have? Will the business model comply with applicable laws, including expanding privacies and protections? And remember as well, issues of compliance are very important, especially when it's a new product, or it's a new business, or it's a new service. There will always be those legal issues that you must comply with. Like, for example, if it's a food industry, then you might have to comply with health issues. If it's an industry, you might have to comply with safety issues and many other aspects of compliance. And having addressed some of these, which I said is not really conclusive, you look at your final slide will be about the ask. What is the ask about? Now, the ask is about asking for what you want. You should be able to say, this is how much I want. And remember, based on your plan on how you're going to use the money, then you're able to say, this is the money in general that will be used, for example, in marketing. And remember, you would have spoken extensively about how you're going to do your marketing and how much it's going to be your financials and so on. So you should be able to say, this money is going to be used for marketing. It's going to be used for buying tools. It's going to be used for equipment. It's going to be used for to pay employees and so on. It could be used for daily running costs. Be able to explain and with certainty what is going to be used for. And also remember, and I must also highlight this fact, that I've just been reminded by salaries that when you speak about your team, you mustn't forget to mention your employees. Who are you going to employ, and what technical and academic qualifications do they have? Are they going to be able to fulfill your objectives and assist you in achieving the company goals? So those are some of the critical issues that you need to look into. And now also in the ask, now that you have told them about what is that you want or what you're going to be using the money for, then you can just give them a high level, and I mean a high level summary of everything that you have just said. And that concludes our presentation today on business funding. For customers' assistance with the pitch deck for your business, or when you have to pitch for any funding, please send us an email to semanugroup@gmail.com. I repeat, semanugroup@gmail.com, or send your email to semanumachaba@gmail.com. I repeat, or send it to semanumachaba@gmail.com. However, for more services that we offer, you can go to www.machabaconsulting.com. www.machabaconsulting.com. And thank you very much.